I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Vishal Gupta is a partner in the technology practice, leading the firm's global coverage of data analytics and artificial intelligence. At Everest Group, Vishal has successfully incubated multiple new practices across data and analytics and AI, and is responsible for the overall growth in terms of revenue, client relationship management, market influence, and talent mentoring. Abhishek Mudra is a practice director in the technology practice, focusing on enterprise platforms. Abhishek leads the global retail and consumer products, (CPG) industry research and the vendor evaluation Peak Matrix initiative. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Vishal.
Well, thank you and welcome everyone. Generative AI is something, that has kind of captured the imagination of almost everyone in the industry, not just us, who are in the IT, tech and tech services industry, but more broadly. Now, we have done multiple webinars and conversations around generative AI in the past. We are launching a new series. We are going a little deeper and seeing, hey, what kind of adoption, what impact Gen AI is having in different industries. So today's webinar is particularly focused on the CPG and retail industry. We have Abhishek with us, he's our SME on the CPG retail industry. And we'll be kind of digging deeper into where do we see the impact, what are the use cases that are moving from pilot to production, what are enterprises really kind of considering, when it comes to Gen AI, and some of the implications in terms of outsourcing implications as well as challenges and things to watch out for. So all of this will be kind of discussed in today's webinar. Feel free to share your questions in the chat. We'll try to do our best to address as many as we can. And with that, without wasting any more time, let me invite Abhishek to, kick off our today's discussion.
Thank you, Vishal, for setting the context. And right, as you rightly said, right, how generative AI has captured imagination of, across enterprises, technology providers, IT service providers, specifically in the retail and CPG industry, given the industry is so close to the end customer, right? So herein, it is capturing the imagination of not only, the supply side and the enterprise ecosystem, but also the end users, right? Because they are the ones who are getting directly impacted by generative AI in this particular industry. Now, before, and I recall when we were setting the agenda for, this particular webinar, and we were thinking that how fast some of these things are evolving, and whether or not we'll be able to do justice, to the topics that we have today, right? In terms of, the impact realized from generative AI, what are the use cases that are moving to production? But again, right, we will try and do justice as much as possible to some of these topics. And, as the topics are, these are evolving topics. And as we speak, some of these topics are evolving. But again, we'll try our level best to present what we have been hearing in our market conversation over the last few months. With that, let's talk about some of the interesting numbers when it comes to generative AI adoption in the retail and CPG industry. And this is a study that we recently did, focused discussions with some of the big retail and CPG enterprises out there globally across North America, UK, Europe, Asia Pacific, and these are retail CPG organizations which are more than $1 billion in revenue. So it's a mix of mid-market, large, and very large retail CPG organizations. And it is interesting to see, right, the kind of enthusiasm around retail and CPG generative AI use cases. So effectively, right, around 70% of the organizations are actively exploring and piloting generative AI use cases. approximately 19% have actually deployed a lot of these GenAI use cases, at least one of the processes. So, this is a number which actually talks about the pilot to production movement. So, wherein we see almost 19% of the enterprises having generative AI use case in our production stage today. And then there are a few, organizations out there who are still planning to do pilot, and some are still dabbling into thinking about generative AI in retail and CPG.
So Abhishek, let me ask a question, and I think it's interesting to see 1% of the organizations have not discussed it yet. I can't fathom there is an organization who wouldn't have discussed Gen AI, but I think it's more around they might not be planning to adopt Gen AI anytime soon. I'm sure they would have discussed it. But on a more serious note, the question: when you compare CPG retail with some of the other industries out there, how do you see the Gen AI adoption, vis-a-vis CPG retail, or let's say banking or insurance, or let's say healthcare? Any color commentary you can provide?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to some of the other industries that you just mentioned, right, be it retail, CPG, or healthcare and life sciences, right? In some of these industries, we see the number of enterprises actually doing pilot and use case pilot and pilot to production. That percentage is relatively smaller. But having said that, right, when it comes to retail and CPG industry, the percentage of enterprises in the production stage, right? That is still, at par with what we see in some of the other industries such as BFSI and, healthcare and life sciences. And I think a big part where I would, want to comment on is, where is that delta, or where is that, kind of a hindrance that's coming in from a, pilot to production standpoint is not, it's not just generative AI, right? When we look at, the broader picture of AI and investments into AI infrastructure and related technologies, I think retail and CPG, when it comes to CapEx on technology investment, I think they lag behind some of the other bigger industry verticals such as BFSI or HLS. If you talk about average tech spending in retail and CPG industry, it is somewhere around 3 to 5% of their revenue. In some cases, for large retailers, for large CPG organizations, that goes up to like 2 to 3%, right? Which is not the case in some of the other industries such as banking, financial services, where this number tend to go up to 8 to 9%. So traditionally, the industry has not invested heavily into the underlying architectural needs of AI, right? The AI infrastructure, the cloud, the data lakes, right? And that is picking up slowly and gradually. And in fact, some of the conversations we have had over the last 12 to 18 months, right? Most of the retailers or CPG organizations have a very bullish outlook when it comes to tech spending, specifically spending into the core AI infrastructure and the cloud infrastructure. So that is really promising to see, and wherein we believe a lot of delta will come in from a pilot to production standpoint of not only Gen AI but AI use cases as well.
Yeah, and I think the other interesting aspect to highlight is, the regulations, right? Some of the more regulated industries like banking or healthcare, not to say they are not kind of investing in Gen AI. I have personally had so many conversations where they're actively exploring, but again, they have to be a little bit more cautious as to where they spend and where they invest, because there's a whole point around compliance and what data they have to share with the authorities and stuff like that. Now, some of that, is not there in RCPG, but the thing around customer data and how do you kind of ensure that the data privacy and all those things are not violated, especially in the light of EU AI Data Act. I think that would be interesting, but I think CPG retail is in a prime position to drive some of this Gen AI adoption. We'll discuss about the regulation in later slides, I know, but I thought that's just something I'll call out.
Yeah. So with that, let's move on to the next. Yeah. So here is a very quick snapshot in terms of what's hot in the market right now, right? When it comes to generative AI, and I think this is I was going through the list of questions, that we received in the run up to this webinar, and I think this was one of the top questions in asked by a lot of participants, right? Which are the use cases where we are seeing the most traction? Which are the ones wherein the retailers and CPG organizations are actively investing into? So we have kind of categorized this across 5 broad categories, right? So when it comes to digital commerce, so the first category, this is a category which has seen the maximum activity when it comes to generative AI use cases, right? So you would have heard almost every retailer out there has been investing into chatbots, and chatbots has been a phenomena for a very long period of time now. But then now what we are seeing is all of those chatbots are embedding generative AI in some shape or form in their existing capabilities. So that is really interesting to see. Second, around personalized recommendations, right? Retail as an industry, there is a lot of need of hyper personalization, right? And therein we are seeing, a lot of retailers are actually investing into using generative AI to build more personalized offers, more personalized recommendations in product searches or product discovery. So therein there is a lot of active investment. I think product discovery as an area is one of the top invested area by the very large and large retail enterprises out there. And finally, virtual try-ons. I think this is, I think, more, applicable to, e-commerce first players like the likes of Amazon out there, right? Therein, they are investing a lot into how can we make the customer journey more personalized. How can we help them select the right product? So not only this is related to product discovery and personalized recommendation, but in a way it is also kind of tying back to the entire discussion around, hey, how can we minimize our returns, right? Because if you are not able to help our customers find the right products or help them visualize the right products, I think therein there is a big challenge of returns management that comes in associated with it. So therein we are seeing a lot of activity. And if you see the scale, right, the maturity of adoption is kind of highest when it comes to digital commerce and generative AI. Second, I think in-store operations. I think this is again a very promising area of for generative AI. But however, right, the adoption right now is limited. One thing I think that a lot of retailers are realizing that while digital commerce is the growth engine for their business, store commerce is here to stay. And if you look at the digital commerce penetration for the retail industry as such, right? Typically, right now, that digital penetration is somewhere roughly around 15 to 16% for a lot of large and very large retailers. I'm not talking about the Amazons, which are digital commerce first, but the traditional store commerce first organization. They have been able to penetrate into the digital space by roughly around 14-15%, and their 3-year, 5-year target is to get this number to 30%. So even with the best of our imagination, the 70 to 80% of the market will still be driven by the store operations, right? And the store experience is becoming central to all our retail conversations that we are having in the market, whether it be around improving the checkout experience, improving the in-store experience, how the product discovery is happening within the store. I think those are some of the very interesting things that are happening. So I think in store operation, there is a lot of focus on retail analytics. How can we analyze the customer data? How can we analyze the customer behavior better to give them more personalized recommendations whenever they are in the store? So that is a really promising area. Moving on, marketing, right? I think therein this is an area wherein the entire adoption of chat GPT and generative AI kind of blew up when it started, right? Generating net new images, generating product images, generating new ideas, new content ideas. I think has been a hot topic of discussion ever since generative AI has come into picture. And we have seen a lot of retailers and big CPG organizations investing heavily into it. A lot of these organizations have more or less transformed their marketing organization, their marketing operations heavily around generative AI and how generative AI is supporting their present marketing operations. So I think that is another area which has a very high maturity of adoption today. Moving on, new product development, right? So again, there have been few organizations, more mature organizations, so the likes of Nestle, Estee Lauder, who are using generative AI on top of their existing data assets to generate new ideas, to generate new formulations. Now, this is not something which is very, very specific to generative AI, but the way it is being positioned, the way it is being brought out in the market is that, hey, we were using AI, but now, we are also using generative AI to build a lot of these, things which are AI enabled and Gen AI enabled. And finally, the big, one of the biggest challenge areas for a lot of retail and CPG organizations is the supply chain. We are seeing a lot of investments happening into supply chain when it comes to generative AI, specifically in areas related to supply chain planning, procurement, better transportation management. I think these are some of the very hot areas when it comes to Gen AI adoption. By the way, when it comes to supply chain, these are also the areas which are very hot for AI adoption per se, right? There we are seeing a lot of investments by platform and tech vendors happening in this particular space.
Yeah, and I think these logos are more representative, where we kind of know of, they have done that, or we were either part of the conversations as our advisory capacity, where we know these are, kind of adopted some of these things. So these are more representative in nature, not comprehensive. Of course, there are a lot of other organizations who have done some of this stuff. One question for you, Abhishek, this is something we received from our audience, is what are some of the specific use cases that you see in sourcing and contracting in the merchandising process?
Yeah, so I think very interesting question, right? I think merchandising as an area is a very, very, very crucial for retailers, right? If you look at some of the biggest retail organization or retail industry at an overall level, right? The industry has been under tremendous margin pressure. So they have to get things right when it comes to their overall operations. And merchandising plays a very important role in terms of how they are planning for how they're planning for their displays, how in store on e-commerce websites. So I think when it comes to generative AI, a lot of the adoption in the merchandising space, especially, is happening embedded into the existing platform. So a lot of these retailers are already using merchandising platforms which they have already either inbuilt, in-house created, or they are using the likes of O9 Solutions or SAP or Oracle, right? A lot of these platform companies are embedding generative AI into the existing platform, and therein we are seeing the use of generative AI when it comes to merchandising. Okay, with that, moving on. So, this is more of a tech vendor view of the previous slide, right? While, there has been a lot of investment by the retailers and CPG organizations, but what we are essentially seeing is the market is very supply driven, right? The tech vendors out there are really pushing the innovation curve. And when it comes to generative AI, they're effectively trying to democratize the technology creation part of it. So I think I mentioned in the beginning of the call as well, right? How cost and capex requirements are something that is very inhibiting to the generative AI adoption in overall in the retail and CPG industry. And herein we see that the existing investments from the retail and CPG organization in some of these platforms, the cloud, either cloud platforms or enterprise platforms, right? Therein, they have been trying to get most out of their existing investment in some of these technology areas. And in many cases, they are working together with these tech vendors and platform companies to build use cases which are very specific to their organization and their micro industry context. I'll take a quick shot in terms of where we are seeing most of the activity. So if you look at from a cloud side of the world, we are seeing a lot of activity on across in specifically Google Cloud, right? Google Cloud has been innovating from a retail CPG standpoint across areas such as chatbots, personalized recommendations, from a new product development, concept generation perspective as well. And it is similar, similarly with some of the other hyperscalers as well, right? The Azure or the AWS, right? They are also, kind of catching up to it. But I think when it comes to data analytics and AI, there is a slight delta which Google Cloud has above AWS and Azure when it comes to retail and CPG industry. When it comes to platforms play in the market, right? Salesforce, if you look at digital commerce, I think Salesforce, had uh, their first foot in the door with Einstein ChatGPT kind of embedding into their existing enterprise platform across their application. And some of the other platform players, right? The SAP, Oracle, they are following the suite when it comes to embedding generative AI into their ERP and CRM application. So we are seeing a lot of adoption of Salesforce as well, when it comes to, or especially on the commerce and marketing side. Finally, in the marketing, content marketing, product cataloging, there is a lot of things that are being built in-house on top of the open source ecosystem that is out there. But having said that, I think Adobe has done, really great with Adobe Firefly when it comes to the marketing operations, transforming marketing operations through generative AI. And then there are, others on the supply chain side, Blue Yonder, Four Kites, right? These are some of the niche tech vendors who are very specialized on supply chain as an area, and by the way, these are not exhaustive, and there are a lot of other vendors as well who have been doing really great work across some of these use cases. Okay, moving on. With that, we have our first poll question. So which of the following generative AI impacts have you experienced in your retail and CPG business? And while I was presenting, I think the previous slides, I was seeing some of the questions in the chat, right, which were talking about, hey, what kind of ROI we are seeing in the, when it comes to generative AI adoption. I think we'll talk about that in the upcoming slides. And I think this question will give us a lot more view in terms of what is the audience thinking about generative AI.
Yeah, and it will be interesting, Abhishek, how does that compare with some of the pilot to production thing that we are seeing, that we also kind of discussed in our first slide, right? Digital commerce, which is more around customer engagement, marketing, which is also here, marketing and content creation. Seems like results are aligning. Improved operational efficiency and cost savings seems to be the highest in terms of where Gen AI impact is experienced, and I think it's natural because it's easy to, or it's not easy, but it's kind of correlating the ROI with direct efficiency and cost saving can maybe relatively easier in the short term, but we do expect some of the new gen use cases which are more geared towards new product development or revenue growth to pick up. But I think if you look at the results, the top three: improved operational efficiency, cost savings, increased customer engagement, and marketing and content creation. I think this aligns with what we are seeing in the market as well.
Yeah. Okay. If I move to the next slide. Yeah, so let's talk about where we are seeing the impact getting realized, or how it is getting more real. So the first one, right, around redefining product discovery, and I think I did mention in the beginning of our discussion as well how from a digital commerce standpoint, the lot of product discovery phase is getting redefined. And if we look at retailers across, like, there has been I think most of the big retailers out there have kind of invested into some of the other specific use case around making product discovery better, right? So if you look at Amazon, they did this, beta. They have started this beta testing around Rufus, right, where they're having a AI shopping assistant for consumers. A lot of other organizations, right, retail organizations, what they have started doing is, you can go to the do the e-commerce website and search for a recipe, and you can, you get a list of all the ingredients that are needed, and you are redirected to the checkout page with all the ingredients pre-added into your cart. So those are the kind of very interesting use cases we are seeing from a product discovery standpoint. And this is not just on the grocery and the e-commerce side. If you look at some of the if you look at some of the things around what IKEA is doing, right? They're introducing a lot of open AI related tools wherein consumers can directly download those applications, and they can design their house and get the list of recommended items to design that house, and go and make the purchase of those items. So that is really interesting to see. And when it comes to impact, right? So all of this is not only having an impact on the customer experience, but in many ways, right? The vision that a lot of these companies have is that a lot of these investment will have a positive impact on their top line as well. And that's where, some of these investments are getting that required amount of impetus when it comes to generative AI investment in these use cases. Moving on from a brand and product innovation perspective, and we saw in our initial survey as well, we saw a lot of ticks on how marketing is getting impacted with generative AI, how the product design and new product design is getting impacted with generative AI. So I think in many ways, right, a lot of the big organizations out there are realizing this potential, and they are developing their own language models, their own own applications on top of their existing data lakes that they have invested over the past few years to get the most out of the existing data they have. And most of these use cases, right, are I would say, in pilot stage, with very few of them getting into that production stage. But then what we are seeing is there is a lot of realization by the enterprises that, hey, this is going to continue in this shape and form with human in the loop, right? So it is in many ways kind of assisting the existing capabilities that they already have, and therein it is having an impact on the kind of innovation that they are able to take to the market, and the kind of efficiency in innovation that they are able to generate within the organization. Finally, talking about retail operations and empowering the frontline workers, right? This is an area, I think, that's what we discussed in the beginning as well. When it comes to the direct impact of generative AI, I think the cost is one of the major drivers of generative AI today. And we are seeing, in fact, in a lot of our market conversations wherein a lot of the use cases are getting from pilot to production, enterprises have started seeing the right ROI. In case of operating costs, right, in areas where generative AI is getting adopted, we are seeing somewhere close to 5 to 15% of operational efficiency gains, which are net new over and above the existing automation related initiative that they would have in that particular focus area. So, therein we see a lot of potential of generative AI. And I think, Vishal, you were asking question around merchandising, and I did talk about it. If you look at Walmart, the way they are doing their procurement, right, they are using generative AI to streamline a lot of vendor negotiations and make the procurement faster. And similarly, we are seeing in a lot of other retail organizations as well, that procurement as an area is getting a lot of traction. And I think I forgot to mention when I was talking about digital commerce, right? A big part of digital commerce is B2B commerce, right? If you look at a lot of big retailers out there who are, store first, brick and mortar first, if we today see 15 to 16% of their penetration into digital commerce space, approximately 50 to 60% of it is being driven by B2B commerce. So therein we are seeing a lot of interesting use cases where these retailers are using generative AI to impact B2B commerce. So again, a lot of interesting things, from an impact perspective.
Yeah, and I think this is also an interesting area, Abhishek. There is also a question. I'm going through the live questions being asked, and it's around, what kind of productivity gains that you see with the adoption of Gen AI, or in other terms, ROI benefits directly available. I know this is kind of a very long drawn conversation, and this involves the talent aspects as well. But any initial thoughts on the productivity gain aspects related to Gen AI?
Yeah, so as I said, right, when it comes to productivity gains, especially in the use cases which are getting to production stage, right, therein we are witnessing like 5 to 15% of productivity gains when it comes to some of these use cases, and these are more from a operational efficiency perspective. Now, some of the KPIs to measure operational efficiency, can be the workforce productivity, or time to respond to some of the queries, or overall reduction in the workload. So some of those things are there, but then a lot of enterprises have started reporting these productivity benefits, and it's in the range of 5 to 15%.
Yeah, and if I have to add, I think this is also the controversial discussion in the market today. Will Gen AI eat the jobs, or will we see layoffs or other things, because organizations are gonna chase efficiencies and margins and everything. And this is something, and this is a kind of a conversation which requires time, can't be addressed in a 2 3 minutes, but I'll try to share my thoughts. And this is something, if some of you are interested, I did a webinar earlier in January, the Gen AI Odyssey, what to expect in 2024. And this was one of the key themes I discussed. And I said, look, see, there are 2 or 3 things. One, a similar, pomp and show was created, a similar hype was created, during the RPA automation era, which already usually started somewhere 10 years ago. And we'll see job losses in the market. See, with any new such technology, you will see certain, transactional jobs, certain transactional skills that will be taken over by the technology. But if you really look at the impact of RPA, it actually helped increase the overall GDP in the industry, which means there were more new jobs created, there were more new areas that kind of led to more work in the industry. And frankly, as I said, see, Gen AI is again one of those technologies which has big talent implications for sure, yes. But I think the way to look at the conversation is not by jobs, but by skills. And the way I look at the market is there will be certain skills which can be, now taken over by the technology, because those skills can be easily handled by, what Gen AI can do, where we didn't have, technology earlier. There are certain skills which will still reside with humans, where we don't want the technology to be there. Think of, regulated areas where you have to report certain things to the authorities, or mission critical areas where you don't want to risk what Gen AI will create, and you want the humans to be there. And then there is a middle ground where humans will be kind of doing the job, but they will be assisted by AI. That is where we strongly believe a future is not where machines, or not where Gen AI take over the complete job. It's where the jobs or the people are augmented by AI or Gen AI. So Gen AI augmented workforce is the future that I'm pretty confident on, which means if you are someone who is not already exploring the technology, is not already exploring how it works and how it can help in your job, then there is a threat for sure. But if you are already using the technology to augment what you do, which means reduce the time to completion of certain tasks, and focus your time on more high value jobs, I think that is something that we're going to definitely see in the future. The rise of AI augmented workforce is what I believe. And if you need more details, or if you are interested in talking more about it, we can set up a session as well. Or if you want to, you can go through our previous webinar, where I kind of spoke about it in detail. Sorry, I took some time, Abhishek, but yeah, back to you.
Yeah. So moving on, and that brings us to the next poll question. So what are the key challenges or inhibitors when it comes to generative AI adoption? Is it change management, regulatory challenges, data security and privacy issue, AI explainability, bias and ethicality, ownership and responsibility, and if there are any others, please do mention.
I think it's fairly clear from the results that we see, Abhishek. This is something that we are seeing as well. The biggest challenge is the data security and privacy issues. I think, when Gen AI was making waves in January last year, December and January, I think the first notable incident was the Samsung one, where the data leak happened of a proprietary data, and that kind of made the entire world aware of risks associated with Gen AI. And I think this is also a nice segue into our next section. So the results are kind of aligned. Data privacy security issues continue to be the number one challenge, along with change management, regulatory, AI explainability, bias, and ethicality. I think it's a good segue for us to move into our next section. So let's do that, Abhishek. Okay, so let me kind of pick this up and see, this is the way I would want to start this is Gen AI is not a bed of roses, or Gen AI is not a silver bullet that's going to solve, all your challenges. Yes, the technology has promise. And yes, we have seen initial areas where, the technology is doing wonders. There wasn't anything before Gen AI that could have solved the problems that it is doing now. So there is a real, benefit. There is a real value that the technology can bring to the table. However, there are also a lot of challenges associated with it. I don't think so I need to kind of talk about it. I think a lot of you already understand this. The scaling part. We're already hearing in the market that the question is not about whether we should adopt AI or not, right? The question is, how do we really scale it? There are a lot of pilots, POCs, experimentation happening in walled green environments where your enterprise stakeholders are testing what the technology can do, what are the outputs look like, and stuff like that. But the question is, how do you kind of start moving into production, and then how do you kind of start scaling it? And there are 3 or 4 big considerations, right? The ROI is unclear. The hallucinations part, which is the output. How do you control the outputs? That is unclear. The talent readiness is not there. So there are a lot of things that impact, the scaling part. And we believe, at least from a short-term standpoint, the organizational readiness for scaling AI becomes important. And these are some of the things that we believe are important. So data readiness, do you have the required data? AI as a technology, works on the principle of, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have the right data, the outputs, will not resonate. The outputs will not be of any use. So the technology, the tool needs to train on the right data, contextual data for your business to provide you the results which will resonate, which will work for you. So data readiness is important. Customer readiness, how do you instill that trust and confidence in your customers when they are using this? Are they fearful that their data will be kind of stolen? Are they do they have fears around privacy? I think those are the things that needs to be taken care of. Financial readiness. I spoke about ROI, right? There was a question in the chat as well on the ROI aspects. It's not clear. The technology is nascent. For one, people are talking about use cases where it is applied. If I had 100 conversations since the start of January till now, on Gen AI, I can bet 90% of the people don't even know what are the costs associated with Gen AI. So the financial readiness, which means having an understanding of what it will take for me to deploy and scale Gen AI, becomes important. Process readiness. See, one of the big convictions we have is, or in a way, you can say the hypothesis is Gen AI is fundamentally solving for a business problem. And if you have to kind of draw parallels, think of cloud. The another big technology innovation that happened, many years back. A lot of enterprises moved to cloud. Cloud fundamentally solved for a technology problem. The friction, the inefficiencies in the current tech stack, and hence the efforts to modernize to cloud. So cloud fundamentally solved for a technology problem, but Gen AI is solving for a business problem. Think of Chat GPT. Chat GPT, the business problem it solved for was new content creation, new content generation. Similarly, most of the other use cases where Gen AI is deployed, it's going to solve for a business problem. And if that is the case, the process readiness becomes important. Is the business process ready? for the Gen AI to be applied? What about the change management concepts? All of that becomes important. And then the people readiness, the talent becomes a critical piece of how you deploy Gen AI. The numbers, the percentages, that you see in the box represent, the importance or where we see, a greater focus needs to be applied. If I kind of move on to our next slide, we kind of delve deeper into some of these aspects. So data readiness, I spoke about data readiness, and I think the poll question, rightly pointed out data privacy and security to be the biggest kind of challenge, to scaling Gen AI, and that's what we have kind of, highlighted here. Not just data security and privacy, but also about how do you kind of build a unified view of your own data. A lot of the organizations, especially the large organizations, Fortune 100, 500 organizations, because they are sitting on massive amounts of data, they themselves don't know how much of that data is in a digitized format, and of that digitized data, how much of that they can actually access and use. So how do you build that unified data view? How do you kind of think about things like data observability? The other thing is improving in the quality of training data. I think I've already talked about it, right? There's a lot of chatter in the market around small language models because, they can be a little bit cheaper than large language models. They, they can be more contextual to the use case that you are kind of deploying. So you don't need to go about large language models. But one of the biggest things that I'm hearing about small language models is while they have promise, and by the way, all the big tech vendors, Meta and others, they're launching their own versions of small language models, cost being the primary concern. But what I'm hearing from the market is, yes, the future might lie on small language models, but the biggest challenge we're facing right now is small language models work only when they are trained on contextualized data. There needs to be strong training that needs to happen for small language models for them to provide the right output, right? At par or better than the large language models. And getting access to that contextualized data is contextualized, annotated, data, labeled quality data is very difficult right now. So how do you get that quality training data to train those models becomes important. People readiness just does not mean, upskilling your workforce and making them AI literate. It's also about the change management aspects, which is, how do you kind of shift the leadership mindset that, look, we need to kind of embed AI, the AI augmented workforce. How do you kind of make that a reality, right? How do you kind of change the cultural, how do you manage the cultural change aspects? Because people, in general, will be less trustworthy of, technology being deployed. How do you instill that confidence that this technology is only to aid you and make you more productive rather than to replace you? So managing that cultural aspect becomes important. So people readiness is the other part. Process readiness, I spoke about it, from a modernizing process standpoint, but also, how do you build the AI governance model? I'll go back to my earlier comment that Gen AI is fundamentally solving for a business problem, but because the technology has no precedent, there are so many governance issues related to the technology, right? One being data privacy and security, but also around, the access, the hallucinations, the ethicality and bias. For all of that, there needs to be a governance model in place. So that kind of becomes critical as you look to scale Gen AI across your organization and your processes. So that becomes a critical piece of the process readiness. Customer readiness, how do you kind of build that trust in your customers? The awareness and education, the technology is for your betterment. It's not going to kind of steal your data. It's not going to infringe on your privacy. So building that trust and transparency is the fourth piece. And the final is the financial readiness. I think I don't need to speak about it. A lot of people in the industry, especially the decision makers, this is a critical question right now. I think the couple of things that I say on the financial readiness piece is, see, for one, start having conversations where you start to get a better view of what does the costs look like for Gen AI, right? A lot of the focus was on, where Gen AI can be deployed, where I can do the POCs and use cases. I think learning about the costs associated, and we have done, some bit of research there. We have published some interesting material. We'll be happy to share it with you. Start learning about the costs associated, right? The other part is, the tricky part is, which is, okay, then how do I start looking at the results, right? What benefits I'm getting out of the Gen AI, tool or technology that I'm deploying, and then looking at the ROI by looking at the outcome versus costs. Now, the cost part is still something that I think you can learn. The benefits of the outcome part is tricky because it varies by use case. In some cases, it may not be quantifiable. But I think building the right KPIs, in terms of maybe not financial KPIs, but how is it kind of impacting the outcomes, helps kind of build a case for business case for Gen AI. And if those KPIs or those outcomes are aligned with organization OKRs, objective and key results, I think that's going to be important. So net, what we're trying to say is a lot of organizations, at least in my conversations, I'm hearing this a lot. How do you look at enterprise readiness for Gen AI? We believe that is an overarching conversation which underlines these 5 critical components: data, people, process, customer, and financial readiness. And that will define how fast the organization can move in adopting and scaling Gen AI. If I have to close this conversation, I know, we are kind of, running short of time. So I'll quickly kind of, talk about this last bit, which is kind of a little bit more important. We talked about it, so I'll kind of double click. See, the security concerns are the biggest reason what I have kind of inferred. I have had numerous conversations with the CIO, CTO organization, with the IT leaders, business leaders, within many organizations. I think the single biggest reason is the safety and the security concerns related to, Gen AI, right? What happened with Samsung? What happened with other organizations? Many organizations have even banned Chat GPT. The employees cannot use it, right? Because of the entire data security concerns. What I'm hearing now in the market is, and there are, these are the 3 key concerns, data privacy, security, which is, how do you kind of ensure your proprietary data does not go outside your organization walls, right, in the public domain. Hallucinations and explainability refer to the fact that how do you look at the output from the Gen AI system? See, the thing is, as you start deploying Gen AI at scale and in many parts of your organization, it will start creating some results. But who is there to tell whether those results are right or wrong? Is there someone sitting and saying, hey, look, this is a right result that the tool created? Think about it, in an organization which has lakhs of employees across the globe, where you have kind of embedded Gen AI in multiple different tools and systems, it will become almost impossible to have owners sitting on each tool and saying, hey, the result is right, the result is wrong. So the hallucination and explainability, which is the accuracy of the output from the Gen AI system, right? There were a lot of cases with, earlier tools, the Gemini recent one, you would have heard about it. The recent launch from Google, there were also some issues around, how the tool kind of reported certain results. So the hallucinations, how does the tool come to a certain conclusion and outcome, and whether that is in line with what one expected? It's a tricky piece, not easy to solve. And the bias and ethicality, this is related to, a lot of it is related to, the data being fed into the system. What you have trained on, if the data itself is biased, the results will be biased. So these are some of the key challenges that we are seeing from a safety, risk, security standpoint. And by the way, the biggest reason why a lot of the use cases are not moving into production. The good news is the industry is waking up that, look, these are the key challenges from a security standpoint that we need to solve for. And we're already seeing, a lot of innovation, new technologies coming in. So for example, from a data privacy security standpoint, there's this ecosystem of new tech startups, Calypso AI, Hidden Layer, Dynamo, Protect. Again, these are not exhaustive lists, just some indicative list of players we are seeing in the market. They have developed specific exclusive solutions just to address this data security and privacy bit. And they're working with a lot of organizations and other partners in the technology ecosystem to how to control this thing. Similarly, on the hallucination explainability side, you see some of the examples there, Nomic, Safe GPT. Similarly, on the bias and ethicality side. So what we're trying to say is these challenges around security and safety are real. It's impacting the scaling part for a lot of organizations. The good news is we are seeing innovation in the market where some of these challenges are being solved for. I wouldn't say they're like completely solved for. It's a learning curve for all of us. But, be on the lookout for such organizations, such new tech startups who are solving for some of these challenges, and see what pilots you can do with them that can help you overcome some of these challenges. Okay. With that, I think, yeah, let me kind of move to the next slide. Sorry, I think there is, so I will do that. I think Before we move on to our last section, quick highlight. I hope you're finding this session useful. I know, there are a lot of things you would want to talk about. It's difficult to address each and every question and go very deep in a webinar like this. So we are happy to offer, a 30-minute conversation with our SMEs experts in AI and RCPG. So if you want to avail that, there is a link that you will get in your chat. Click on that link. And you can book a session, with our experts, and we can kind of talk about specific questions, specific priorities that you have, and we can share our insights and learnings from whatever conversations and understanding we have of the market. With that, let me move on to our next section and invite again Abhishek to take us through from an outsourcing implication standpoint.
Yeah, thank you, Vishal. Okay, with that, right, I think in the chat, I saw a lot of questions coming in, in terms of how are some of these, investments taking place, right? Are these done by the enterprises themselves, or, it is being developed in partnership with the tech vendors, with the service providers? So I think this is a question we asked in one of our recent surveys around what is the preferred sourcing model to build generative AI capabilities. And around 80%, 82% of the enterprises said that their preferred model is an outsourcing or a hybrid model. Hybrid model is more of a co-innovation or co-development sort of a model. So this is very interesting to see. And when it comes to the role of these third-party providers, be it technology enterprises or IT service providers, some of the areas where the intervention is needed by these providers is in terms of support in building Gen AI solutions and enhancing the existing technical capabilities of the organizations. See, when it comes to retail CPG industry, right, some of the organization in the industry have some of the best of the talent when it comes to AI or data related skills, right? There is a very strong IT and technology backbone that the industry has. What lacks in the industry is whether this talent is ready to scale their AI use cases, scale their existing AI investment to next level. And therein we are seeing a lot of bridging of those gaps happening, wherein the service providers come in and they bring in their specialized talent with an industry specific experience, and they help elevate that kind of challenge for these enterprises. I think second is around supporting the in-house technical teams by handling specific tasks and activities. There is also a lot of Gen AI solutions that are getting integrated with existing technology. So if they have created a use case and they have evaluated whether or not it's working, it is good. When it comes to pilot to production, right, there is a lot of integration that needs to happen, right, with the existing technology stack, with technology stack across functions and across business units. So I think therein, there's third-party service providers coming in, helping them with this broader integration as a challenge. Finally, I think one of the biggest challenge area is around the data security, privacy, and regulatory compliance. And therein, there is a lot of handholding needed from the industry and the partner ecosystem in terms of how can the enterprises navigate some of these regulatory compliances, not only in the present state, but also from a forward-looking perspective. Hey, these are the compliances or regulatory challenges today, but can you help me understand what will happen in a 3-year time frame? So for example, EU AI Act, right? We are having a lot of market conversations in terms of enterprises asking, right, if you're building a IT strategy roadmap today, how do we incorporate the implications of EU AI Act, and how AI Act by some of the other regions will impact our AI strategy, impact our IT and data strategy. So therein, there is a lot of handholding needed, a lot of market education needed from the enterprise ecosystem.
So Abhishek, quick one here. I know we're short on time, but just quick one. Because this is a question I received, from the audience, and also as run up to this webinar. What are those key criteria that enterprises are currently looking at, as they look to engage a third-party partner for their Gen AI initiatives?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to third-party partner engagement, right, specifically in Gen AI, we are seeing a lot of it driven proactively by the partner community, right? So we are seeing service providers creating that business use case for the enterprises in terms of, hey, these are the use cases that are gaining adoption in the market. By the way, I have a good understanding of your existing landscape, and I believe that, okay, in procurement as a space, you can do really good by incorporating GenAI. And hey, I will come in and build this solution at a POC level. So those are the kind of conversation triggers that are happening from a GenAI perspective when it comes to third-party service providers. Okay, moving on, right? So we have seen that there is a lot of potential in terms of how third-party ecosystem, not only tech vendors but IT service providers, can help enable enterprises with their existing generative AI related challenges and capability building efforts. But at the same time, there are a lot of implications for service providers, and some of the questions and some of the market conversations we are having are around some of these key questions that you see over here. In terms of, hey, should we be building our own applications to create a stickiness with the enterprises, or should we be building applications on top of existing platforms out there? So, we are seeing a lot of traction in terms of enterprises partnering with the platform vendor ecosystem, be it a hyperscaler or SAP, Oracle, or Salesforce of the world, and building applications on top of it. So I think that's one area we have started seeing a lot of directional movement in terms of how some of these applications are built by the third-party service providers. Some of the other areas, right, we are having a lot of questions in terms of, hey, how is the startup ecosystem evolving, right? Who are the right kind of startups or niche vendors to partner with? What I think one interesting question is also around, how do we select the right foundational model, right? And maybe Vishal, I'll ask you to chime in, in terms of, and because this is a common question in the chat today as well. How do you select the right foundational model? So any quick highlights on that?
Yeah, see, I think there are multiple aspects that go into it, and there's a fair bit of education that is needed because now, you are right. There are, hundreds of foundational models out there in the market, and then there's a whole conversation around open source versus proprietary, large language models versus small language models. I think, there are two broad dimensions that needs to be looked at. One is the ease of adoption, which means, looking at things which are crucial for enterprise adoption of an LLM. And, within ease of adoption, there can be, three key things. One, the risks, which is, how susceptible the model is to common GenAI risks, such as data privacy, security, reliability, explainability, bias, and ownership, right? The second is the average cost of a usage, which is what is the cost incurred by the user for the specific LLM model. And third is market readiness, which is what is the current community developed for that LLM, to aid users, of the mode, including documentation, marketplace, model availability in multiple modes. So I think that kind of, in a way, feeds into the ease of adoption part. The other critical thing is the capability, which is the basic ability of an LLM to generate effective outputs. And again, these can be measured through key things. One, the features, which is the distinctive attributes such as number of parameters, tokens, languages, modalities. Scalability is second, which is the effort required to scale the LLM. And third is the quality of output. What is the quality of content generated, including the context understanding and reasoning? Again, so it's not easy to kind of define, hey, look, these are the one or two things. It's kind of a broader set of parameters. In fact, we at Everest, we have done a study last year, in August, September, for the key LLMs out there in the market and compared them on some of these parameters. It's there on our public website. You can see some of the results. We're going to do a refresh of that, of course, with a much larger number of foundational models now. And hopefully, that will help answer some of these questions.
Yeah. Okay, with that, I think this brings us to the end of the discussion today. And I think there are definitely a lot of unanswered questions in the market today. And these are some of the questions that we are also evaluating in our market research and the market conversations that we are having. I think some of the top ones is, in terms of, hey, where does the buck lie when it comes to generative AI? Where can I make money in generative AI? And this is the question that is being asked not only from the enterprises, but also the service provider community. Hey, how can I monetize generative AI. So I think that's one big area. There is a lot happening from a talent perspective as well. There are new roles that are emerging, which kind of lie at the intersection of your domain understanding and your data knowledge, right? So it's roles which lie at the intersection of data scientist, software engineer, functional consultant, and industry SME. I think those kind of roles are getting evolved in the market today. There's a lot happening from a tech vendor side as well, right? So there is a lot of investment happening on the tech vendor side, but at the same time, right, there is a key question, right, from software vendors or vendors who are creating assets, is how can I monetize my investments that I have already done in generative AI?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of questions that are unanswered. We're happy to speak about it. As I highlighted earlier, use the link if you want to set up a session with our SMEs. And I know we are 2 minutes over our time, so we'll not hold you any longer. Thank you for joining the webinar today. We hope you found value. We'll be sharing the deck and the recording. There will be a link for that. And, we wish everyone all the best in this journey for Gen AI. So thank you. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.